In this episode, I am joined by the creator of After the Vampire Wars and Worlds United, John Snead, as we talk about his inspiration for both campaign settings. Welcome to the Mythras Matters Podcast, Season 1, Episode 69, After the Vampire Wars and Worlds United. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and welcome to May. If you've been following me on YouTube, you will be aware that I am starting a new campaign setting based on After the Vampire Wars. Over the next few Saturdays, real life will impact on our actual playing sessions. So I've decided to stream live the creation of my new campaign setting called The Gifted. I've already had one session where I shared my initial ideas, and I have to say doing it live really supported my creativity. In the last live, various ideas and concepts slotted into place, and I got excited about the new adventures. There are no spoilers in the live, so if you would like to gain a sneaky peek at my creative process, then make sure you tune in or watch them later on my YouTube channel. Also, I am super proud to say that I've made some sales from my RPG shop. Yay! It's been a while coming, but I've eventually made it. I'm super grateful to the people who have bought some of the one-liners and the encounters. There are some free ones there, so if you would prefer to try before buying, then do check them out. I have to say that having someone purchase one of my encounters has made me keen to create more now, so do stay tuned. And the final bit of self-promotion, I've actually started to reproduce the fanzine that I used to create in my early teens. It is called Animated Dead and is available as a membership perk on my RPG page. So do check that out as well. After an excellent discussion with the Master of Horror himself, and if you missed that, please do check out episode 68. I was truly excited to have an opportunity to chat to John Snead, the creator of both After the Vampire Wars and Worlds United. So without further ado, I'll let him introduce himself.
All right, I am John Snead. I am a role-playing game designer, have been doing that since the late 1990s, so quite a long time now. Yeah, almost 30 years.
Yeah, that's, do you play a lot of games still?
Yep.
Or, yeah?
Oh yeah, of course. Not in between campaigns at the moment, since I play, I don't really GM very much, which is a little rare for people who write role-playing games.
That's what I was going to say. That's very rare. You tend to get the GM chair all the time if you're a creator. Yeah. So, and do you play a range of games or just specific games?
A wide range.
Brilliant. So you created the excellent After the Vampire Wars. And I thought we could start off by asking, what was your inspiration to actually create that game?
Yeah, well, that was, basically I looked around at stuff, I mean, which I do sometimes, just there, a bunch of horror and supernatural games, but none of them really reflected, some of the modern literature. I mean, anything from the paranormal romance of like, Laurel K. Hamilton or True Blood or something like that, or, the more just straight urban fantasy like, Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden books. And so I wanted something that felt like that.
Yes.
And
100%. I love the Harry Dresden books. I think they're absolutely fantastic. So did you decide to go with the design mechanism and use Mythras rather than creating a huge rule set yourself? What was the decision there?
well, I mean, partly I don't want to like be a game company, so I
Yeah.
like writing for other people.
Yeah.
And all the sales and things like that, which I have no talent for whatsoever, somebody who does can do that, and that's awesome. But
100%.
yeah, no, that was a little bit of an odd thing. Basically, back before Chaosium reorganized, they wrote to me and wanted to do a non-game specific edition of the thing that I'd done for the magic rules for Nephilim in Liber Ka. And so I did. And then, we talked a little bit more. I thought about a supplement for it. And so I wrote the first version of After the Vampire Wars, which the production values and stuff weren't very. Chaosium was having a lot of problems then. They got much, much better. I've worked with them since then. They're wonderful. They're amazing. But they had some problems, and man, that book was a mess. I mean, my middle name is Richard, so the initial R. The name on it was John F. Snead. I have no idea where the F came from. Did they misprint the R? And just a bunch of it was a mess.
Yeah.
But and then, after Chaosium reorganized, they were talking about, do you want to keep the rights for this and or do you want to have us sell it? And I thought, a new edition would be good. And so I'll take the rights back. And then I approached Lawrence and it's like, cool, this is awesome. And I think it's a much better, I mean, I'm sure a few people saw the previous version. I think this is a much better one. I expanded stuff and, both the setting and rules. And I think it's a very solid project. And yeah, now, one of the big inspirations in a book that I think it's an odd book, but people who are into this is Robin McKinley wrote an urban fantasy book. It was in the 2010s, I think, called Sunshine, which was about you know a world with supernatural creatures and stuff that always been there and always been known, unlike after the Vampire Wars where it was a big reveal. And there had been a big war between humans and vampires. And I thought, I've never seen a game do that. And I mean, a bunch of urban fantasy, they talk about, the people who know about the supernatural, which might be everyone or might just be, the wizards and the vampires and stuff, that, we want to prevent a big war between humans and supernatural creatures. And I thought, well, what happened if it already happened? And, what would that be? And, so then I thought about, how this would come about. And it's like, well, okay, the big reveal, governments and stuff find out about this, and then they decide to try to get rid of vampires because, they're preying on humans. And then suddenly, they find out they've bitten off a lot more than they can chew because vampires are a lot more powerful, at least the elder ones. And so, it's not, no, neither side, was exterminating the other. And so just, they eventually there was peace, and now everybody's got to live together. And I thought that would be a very interesting setting. Not very long after that, so people are still working out what it means. And and I got to put in, that all of the things you see in the urban fantasy ones where you have vampires out in the open of like, the vampire bar and things like that, which, a bunch of authors have done things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, no, I thought it was really cool. I mean, what I regularly do is look around at, what genres of fiction that are cool aren't really being served quite as well as they could be for with role-playing games. And this was one, and I think I did a bang up job.
You certainly did. And I really love that idea that things are veiled from mortal view. And, and even more so, the idea that some people might have seen things, but not accept it for what it actually is. And they sort of like think, no, I didn't really see that, at all. And I love that sort of like dichotomy in it, that there's the difference between those two groups of people. Do you see in the rules, players can play vampires? That's right, isn't it? They could be sort of like lesser vampire. Yeah.
Or you could, or if you play, I mean, they're different tiers of the game, which is something I also thought was exciting. I like that. And if you want to play, really powerful characters, then you can play an elder vampire. And, you're going to be going up against a lot tougher opposition if you're doing that. Or you can, a really experienced wizard or something like that. So, yeah.
It's interesting, the tiered system. I don't know if you've seen Destined, the superhero by Brian and Mike, and that has a similar tiered system in.
Yeah.
And I first came across it in After the Vampire Wars and really love that idea of matching how your players want to actually interact with the game, which I thought was brilliant. Obviously you've run campaigns for this, I'm assuming. So
yeah,
what sort of activities, what goes on in those campaigns? Could you give us an idea about that?
Oh, let's see. Thinking back about, well, I mean, some of it is, various sorts of heists. Had a few of those. Heists are fun. And we've done a little bit with actual paranormal romance of just, I mean, it's not the front and center, but as a background element of just, having characters get interested in other supernaturals and things like that, and that can be fun. I mean, you got to have the right group for it. That some people would not be into that, but that's pretty cool. And I put, because of that, I put a whole section in the advice to GMs of how to do romance. Because I figured you don't see that too much in role playing.
No, not at all.
We've done that some, and
yeah, and I think romance, especially concerning vampires, often comes into films and fiction. Very much so. Yeah, I mean,
starting with Bela Lugosi's Dracula. I mean, it's been there forever. Yeah,
exactly. I really like investigative campaigns when they're sort of like trying to find things out. Do you feel that could be used in After the Vampire Wars?
Yeah, no, especially with like, the other world with the Fae and things like that. I mean, they are a constant threat, less bad now that the war's over and stuff, but there's always plots by the Fae that you need to find out, or somebody is kidnapped into the other world and you got to get them back. And, they are they are definitely opponents. You're not playing the Fae. They're not human. They never were human. They're just these weird, barely comprehensible things that often aren't very nice.
Yeah, 100%. And when I was sort of like looking at after the Vampire Wars, I didn't really want to go down the route of mass battles on the streets, if that makes sense,
Right. Yeah, sure. I mean, they're, you got Russia for if, people want that, but yeah, wasn't really what I thought would be the central kind of play. Yeah.
And that's just mentioning Russia there was something that I wanted to ask you about, because a lot of the time we see campaigns as in one country or one setting, but I got the feel from the book that players could actually go to other parts of the world where things were different. Was that something that you thought about when you were creating the game?
Yeah. And I mean, I was thinking about it. It's like, well, American Russia were the start of trying to get rid of vampires. But, once the war happens, it's a modern, media connected world. People are going to find out about it and know that, no, this isn't just people being delusional or anything. It's like, no, there's a vampire, like, throwing a car on TV. So maybe these things are actually real. So, what does the rest of the world think about it? You have an option of, you could play in some place like, where you are, the UK or something, where, people aren't, more people sort of, well, maybe they aren't real, or maybe they're real, but not that important, or, as opposed to, people who've, fought in the war and, the war was in their city. And, they know for an absolute fact that, there are vampires and there's the vampire bar over there.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. Obviously, it's set in the modern era, the, sort of like 21st century. What challenges did like modern weapons bring to the game? Because in fantasy, we don't have to deal with automatic weapons or grenades or anything like that. What challenges did you have to sort of like balance that, the powerful vampires, but also the possibility that somebody might whip out a revolver and start shooting?
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought about, what kind of immunities vampires have and things like that. So, yeah, no, I mean, if you're, fighting a wizard, if they don't have some good protection spell, yeah, you can just shoot them and they'll die. A vampire, that's a lot harder. And, werewolves too, lycanthropes too, and, so.
I really like that moment when a character brings out their weapon, shoots at something, but it keeps coming, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because it's that sudden.
Yeah. Thinking about the lycanthropes, that reminds me of something else I thought about that I thought was sort of interesting, which is I wanted to limit the sort of how gonzo some of the, transformations and stuff were. So it's like nobody actually turns into a wolf in this game. The lycanthropes, you get hairier and claws and fangs, but it's, yes, no, okay, that's entirely unrealistic to happen in, 30 seconds, but it's, seems more, quote, realistic than somebody just turning into a wolf.
That was something I was going to ask you, actually, because did you feel that you wanted to steer away from cliches, like the lycanthropes turning into wolves and running around? Was it something that you wanted to have in the rules about silver bullets? Did you want it very true to life, true to fiction, should I say? Or were you prepared to move away from and create your own understanding?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot, much more the second of just, looked at each one of the kind of supernaturals I wanted to have. And it's like, well, you know, everything from how does this work from a game balance perspective to what would be fun to play. And also just, I didn't want, to just reinvent the same wheel everybody else has done
Mm.
too.
So I'm actually starting out new with After the Vampire Wars and creating my own campaign. So what advice would you give to players and GMs who are starting out with the rules?
Hmm. I mean, one of the big things is just what we talked about before, power level, make sure that everybody's on the same page of, do you want to play just basically ordinary humans or something, somebody who was turned into a vampire, 3 weeks ago and is or, do you want a little more powerful, or do you want full on, gonzo elder vampires and, powerful wizards and stuff like that? And these are going to be very different campaigns.
Yes, 100%. I think I'm going for the title of the campaign is Gifted, and the idea that they're a small group of humans who have a bit of supernatural powers, but not a huge amount, and they're investigating paranormal. I don't know if you ever listened to or saw Sapphire and Steel. It was on British television, but it's that sort of like
I've heard of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Neat.
But I definitely want to have vampires and lycanthropes and the Fae there as well. And like I said, I love this idea that everybody's really coexisting in the world, but just one is hidden from the other. You have written another rule set called Worlds United. Now, I have to admit at this point, I don't have a copy. So please tell me what Worlds United is all about.
Okay. It's science fiction pulp. And I was thinking, most people do pulp in like, the 20s, or you occasionally get sort of pulpy steampunk stuff. And I was like, let's go a little bit further. And so Lawrence and I went back and forth and, you know, late 50s, late 1950s. So, you're in the realm of rocket ships and stuff. But I'd also had for years been wanting to do a book that was basically taking H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds and also this little story nobody's read but me called The Crystal Egg that is basically sort of probably set on the same Mars, and then, do something, well, what happens after the war? And there's these Martians out there, and humans now know they're, up there. And so just I threw all that in the blender and got a thing where, the Martians attacked, in the around 1900, and there was a big battle, and then they came back for that world's basically equivalent to World War II. And in the meantime, humans had a lot of scavenged Martian technology around. And one of the things, and a bunch of the Martian technology was psychic based. And just simply the things I thought is being in the presence of, working psychic technology sort of can, for some people, unlock their psychic powers. So now you have humanity with psychic powers and stuff like that. And then, you know, I also thought that, just humans on Earth wasn't interesting, so that the Martians years and years, well, thousands of years ago, had brought some human servants to Mars and had tried to colonize Venus and failed because, dinosaurs eat them, and brought along some of the human servants who survived. And so, you have humans and reptile people, because you got to have the reptile people if you're on Venus. So all the dinosaurs. I mean, we're in pulp here, so you know, Venus is steamy and jungly, and Mars is dry with canals. I mean, it's basic, basically the pulp
Fantastic.
solar system.
Yeah. And
You know,
are there, after the Vampire Wars, you've got those three levels of engagement. Do they exist in Worlds United?
absolutely. No, I really like the ability to, people have the campaign they want. And so, yeah, I mean, you can just play, pretty much an ordinary human with like, one or two minor pulp abilities or more than that. Or, the top tier I looked at and it's like, because it was, not around the time that the Captain America movie came out, the first one. And I was like, you can make Captain America this if in the top tier only, but yeah, I thought that's pretty cool. I like that. I approve.
Yeah. And how much space travel is in the game? Is it just between Earth, Venus, and Mars, or are there
Uh,
starships? Tell me about that.
no starships. There's some stuff at the very end about humanity is just starting to explore beyond the asteroid belt. And so, moons of Jupiter and Saturn and things like that. But that's all, I describe some of what's there, but it's really pretty uncharted territory. And all the way out to Pluto, where there's like weird alien ruins from, visitors from another star. But, humans are not going between stars or anything because it's a lot of what you have in a lot of 50s and 60s science fiction. You got the atomic rockets that can get to Mars in a couple of weeks. Getting to Saturn is a bunch of months. Getting to Pluto is longer than that, and they have suspended animation drugs because some of the reptile people on Venus are really good with using strange Venusian plants to make nifty stuff. And yeah, so there's exploration if you want it, or there's politics and intrigue because, like, the big blobby H.G. Wells Martians are, they drink human blood. They're not nice things. And, there's more or less peace with them, but, people are not trusting them and for good reason.
Right, yeah, 100%. What are the octopoids?
That's them. That's the mark. They're basically two kinds. Well, there are three intelligent species on Mars. The humans who were brought here a long time ago, so they're like, taller, skinnier, and slightly better psychic powers, just exposure to that. Then there are the octopoids who drink blood, and then there's the creatures from that H.G. Wells story, The Crystal Egg, which are these weird tentacle wing things that are a good bit smaller than the octopoids, and they don't drink blood. And they're people don't entirely trust them because they worked with the octopoids, but some of them were enslaved by the octopoids. So, and you can play one of those if you want. It would be pretty weird though. That's not strongly recommended. Mostly just, you know, the reptile people, humans from Venus, humans from Mars, humans from Earth.
And what sort of weaponry do we have? Therefore, you're selling this to me 100%. By the way, I'm definitely going to have to invest in this. I'm just worried about whether or not is it laser beams at dawn, with their laser pistols, or is it archaic weapons? Where's the balance?
It's basically, you know, a mixture of the kind of weapons people would have had in, the late 50s and then psychic technology. And
Right.
so including psychic weapons and, including, heat ray pistols because they
Mm.
derived from the, Martian heat rays and stuff like that. And, then there's psychic communicators that even if you don't have psychic powers, you can use. You have to have one. And, stick it behind your ear, and someone else has one, and you can like, basically, psychic cell phones because,
Nice.
well, one of the things I've noticed is especially with younger people gaming, they expect things like cell phones and stuff. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
that in fantasy games recently. And
Yes.
so it's like, sure, fine. You can all talk even if you're hundreds of miles away from each other. This is fun. And so yeah, no, there's new psychic technology coming out, and then there's, weird Venusian drugs and chemicals and
Wow.
psychic powers. So yeah, it's a pretty gonzo setting.
Yeah. I love psionics and I love psychic powers, so that's definitely drawing me in. One
There's a
thing,
lot of that. There's a lot of that there. Yeah.
excellent. When I first grabbed After the Vampire Wars, I always, with any new rule system, I try to grab a module or an adventure that is pre-made just to sort of like get the feel
Hmm.
of the setting. Are there any modules for Worlds United or After the Vampire Wars?
Sadly, not because I'm not very good at I mean, I'm much more the kind of person. It's like at the end of After the Vampire Wars, there's a bunch of, adventure seeds for people to flesh out. And I
Yeah,
find I'm much better at doing that than, writing up a full campaign that I don't know who's going to be playing and stuff. It's just not really my forte. I'm
right.
more of a, setting kind of person. And also, I love writing magic systems, and I've had a lot of
Really?
fun with those.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful for new GM. So I will definitely have a look at those seeds in the back of the After the Vampire Wars books for a starting point. Are you working on anything at the moment that you could share with us?
Well, sort of slightly frustrating. Not a lot of work, but doing this D20 project, tentatively titled Paragons. That's like
Oh,
slightly not higher level characters, but higher power characters of the same level. The It's sort of stalled because this is for the new rule set, and they haven't come out with the SRD yet, despite promising
oh,
months. Now we're into months. So, hopefully soon. I mean, it should be
hopefully
any day
soon.
now.
Yeah.
And
So
I can't really put out anything until I know what I can include.
exactly, 100%. You have to be so
Yeah.
careful with things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So
no, because yeah, no, I mean Hasbro would sue me and the people I'm writing for.
yeah,
So yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
100%. So, do you have any final tips or advice for anybody who's wishing to get into the After the Vampire Wars or Worlds United?
Well, with After the Vampire Wars, one of the major pieces of advice would be read some, good modern urban fantasy, paranormal romance, whatever floats your boat in that way, and
Yeah,
and there's a bunch of old pulps and stuff for Worlds United. I mean, one of the things that was very important to me to do was updating the pulps in terms of, I mean, this was written in a time where attitudes about, race and gender not modern, and I wanted to have something where, that was more modern, and I
yeah.
figured I had a good excuse for this. It's like, well, people have been having psychic powers by, the end of the 1950s on Earth for, well more than a generation. And, anyone can have psychic powers and can be pretty powerful. So maybe that would, reduce racism and sexism, at
Oh,
least
yes.
in that setting it did.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if
I've
that's how realistic that is, but, people, using telekinesis is not the most realistic either. So whatever.
Exactly. I do have 2 books that I'm going to go off and read after today's discussion. I've got Sunshine and Crystal Egg, The Crystal Egg, which I think
well, that's a short story. That's a short story. But you can, I think you can just type in Crystal Egg online and find it. I think it's public domain and everything. So
brilliant. I will definitely have a read of that. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to have a chat to us, and we really do appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have very much enjoyed it. Thank you for reaching out. This was very cool.
I've encouraged John to join the Discord, so do look out for him. He is the perfect person to answer all your questions about After the Vampire Wars and Worlds United. As you might have heard, I don't actually own Worlds United, but I've added it to my shopping list after chatting to John, since it sounds excellent, and I always love some alien psychics. Remember, if you would like someone to appear on the podcast, or for us to discuss a certain topic, or even to contribute to the podcast yourself, then why not drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. We're always looking for reviews or chats with people, so if you are interested, you can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the various forums I frequent. And that's it, another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. You can also become a member of the orders on both my Patreon and Ko-fi pages, where there are a number of perks available. Links to both are in the show notes. I really appreciate your support, and do check out the Discord and Tapper Talk forums, where there are great people sharing their ideas within discussions. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in June. Until then, I hope all your opposed roles succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.